DSpace installation. Perhaps this is the single most complex operation which you normally encounter with DSpace when you are interacting DSpace. In fact, as an open source software, you may have to compile the software on any operating system you wish. So, the required software before we go ahead on how to compile DSpace, you can have any Linux or Unix system. Technically, you can run on Windows also, but my personal experience is it is much easier to install DSpace on a Unix or Linux system for the simple reason many of the open source software that are required for DSpace are more or less readily available in Linux operating systems. For example, in a Debian or Ubuntu or Mint, you can open a Synaptic and just click the software names like PostgreSQL or mail servers and they get loaded or installed. Okay, you do not have to separately download them and configure them as in the case of Windows operating system. Then you may also require a mail server, and many organizations may have their own mail server, but again if you wish you can use even Google as a mail server. That means even if your organization does not have a mail server, one option is setting up a mail server on your own system. Another is use Google mail account so that Google takes care of sending the mails and all that from or receiving the mails from its users, any mail regarding DSpace. That is normally, you know, DSpace heavily depends on a mail system to inform the subscribers about new editions or to inform the reviewers about new submissions or to inform the metadata editors about the accepted submissions. All that runs on a mail system. That is the reason mail server is very important, whether you configure on the same machine or you use organizational mail server or you use Google account to take care of the mail services. Okay. Other required software are you require a relational database management system. Of course, you require DSpace as such. Then you require, if you want to install DSpace by yourself, you have to require a Java compiler and a Java servlet container for JSP programs. Then for compilation of Java programs, you require a combination of Ant and Maven, which I will explain what each stands for. Okay. In Unix, you can use any Unix flavor, and you know Unix comes in, or especially Linux comes in hundreds of flavors. Probably Red Hat has a Fedora which is a free operating system, whereas if you want to go for commercial, Red Hat Enterprise Server is there, though personally I feel there is no specific advantage using a commercial side of Red Hat or SUSE, Debian, Ubuntu, Mint. There are so many Slackware Linux like that. There are so many Linuxes. In fact, earlier I tried even Solaris when it was under Sun. Now it is under Oracle Corporation, or HPUX, which is nothing but a Unix system for Hewlett Packard computers, or AIX, which is again a Unix system for IBM machines, and Mac OS X, that is on Apple Macs, it is another flavor of Unix. So, you can use practically any platform while configuring or installing DSpace. Then Java compiler, again you have many choices of Java compilers. There is Sun Java, that is now Oracle Java. Then you have IBM Java, then there is OpenJDK. OpenJDK, of course, you do not have to even sign agreements or anything, though other Java compiler also are free. Then you have Java servlet containers. The most common and popular one for DSpace users, mostly DSpace users use Tomcat, which is an Apache Foundation product. But again, you have other servlet containers like Jetty, Racine, JBoss. But again, you have to remember that JBoss again runs on Tomcat. Okay? So, you can use OpenJDK for compiling the Java programs, and for running the DSpace instance or starting and shutting down the DSpace instance, you can use Tomcat. Okay, that is normally my choice, but again you can use any of the ones that are mentioned in this slide. So, Maven and Ant, good old days, I think we never required Maven and Ant, just a Java compiler was good enough, but as things are becoming much more feature rich or complex, probably you require Maven and Ant to compile DSpace source code. For that matter, perhaps you require even internet connectivity, because Maven brings lots of jar files from that is Java archive files from the internet. Again, half the way through, just it was Ant that was sufficient to compile DSpace source files. But again, now you require to have Maven also, but normally in Ubuntu operating systems, once you choose Maven, automatically Ant also gets installed. So, what exactly these two stands for? Apache Maven, again Maven is an Apache Foundation product, a software for project management. After all, Java is a huge project and a suite of software actually. And Apache Ant, a tool for authoring software build process. It is something similar to make command. For example, if you are compiling Perl programs, normally we use make command. So, in the Java world, it is Ant which does the build process. In addition, you can have a database management system software. You have the open source choice, that is PostgreSQL, or if you think you can go for Oracle even. Personally, of course, I use PostgreSQL because I do not see any reason to go for Oracle unless your database really requires to be scaled up. Then, if you want to configure a mail server on the DSpace system itself, Linuxes have two kinds of mail servers, rather two software for mail servers. One is Postfix and the another is Exim4. You can use any one of them, or if your organization has a mail server or you intend to use Gmail account, then you do not have to configure either Postfix or Exim4. So, DSpace installation can be run in 4 ways. One is, once you compile DSpace, you can run DSpace on Tomcat. This is the fairly simple one. But again, remember the disadvantage being in the URL 8080 will appear, or whichever port you have chosen. By default, Tomcat uses 8080 port, but if you think you can run on another port, but in any case, if you run just Tomcat, then you have to inform everybody, in addition to the URL, they have to add :8080/JSPUI or XMLUI to access your DSpace instance. And again, if you want to run Tomcat on a secure socket layer, so that the user's passwords are encrypted and so that sniffer software cannot guess the passwords. Please remember, if you haven't if you are not running on HTTPS, that means if you are not using SSL, secure socket layer, the passwords get transmitted over the network in a plain text. But if you run SSL, they go into a kind of an encrypted mode. Okay. But again, the best way is integrating Tomcat with Apache, okay, so that you do not have to use 8088 and people access through your Apache web server. It is Apache which in turn interacts with the Tomcat installation of your DSpace. And if you want to have more even complex, in addition to Apache, you add secure socket layer, then probably your URL would look like https:// and your URL. In our case, https://drtc ISI bang ACN to access our digital repository. So, installation on Ubuntu I would like to explain in the following slides. Of course, on internet also you can get a lot of instructions and guidelines on how to install DSpace on various platforms. The one I suggest is I believe at least the simple approach and less pedantic. The following slides will give step by step. With minor differences, I think you can run the same thing on Debian or Mint. Any of the Ubuntu derivatives or variant flavors of Debian or Linux, Ubuntu. And of course, you require internet connectivity because Maven brings lot of jar files. Then also you require to be a super user, or at least you should have super user permissions of your Linux or Unix system. Okay? Step 1. So, it is always easier to compile the Java programs of DSpace from the terminal. So, if you are too used to Windows only and hardly not familiar with terminal, better you have to be, because it is much easier to do that. And probably there is no alternative to terminal approach to installing DSpace. So, if you press Ctrl Alt T, you get a terminal open, and make sure you have super user permissions. So, step 2 would be just install the required software with apt-get. You can use Synaptic, which is the GUI based program, but anyhow it is fairly simple, but make sure you are adding sudo to it. Then obviously it asks for your password. If your login has super user permissions, it downloads and installs OpenJDK, the present version is 8, and it also installs Maven and Ant, Postgres and Apache web server. Now, the next approach is to create the DSpace user. If you want to create DSpace user where his DSpace home is directly under root /home/DSpace. Otherwise, by default, Linux creates DSpace under home directory, but if you prefer under root directory, then you can say add user --home/DSpace and DSpace. That means you are creating a DSpace user under root DSpace as home, and you are adding and it asks for passwords and all that which you have to supply. You also have to create a DSpace user under Postgres. The above command does only for the Unix system, but you have to create a user called DSpace for the Postgres database management system. For that you say sudo su just Postgres, then of course if it asks for the super user your passwords and assuming that you have super user permissions, then you can say create user -u, that is user is Postgres user, -d -a -p DSpace. That means these are the options so that it creates a password, it asks for a password for the DSpace. If you want, you can give DSpace as the password. If you have given any other password, remember in your dspace.cfg file, you have to replace the default DSpace password to the password you would be choosing here. Then you can come out of the Postgres. Now, step 5 is log into DSpace first. That is, if you say su-DSpace, then you get logged into DSpace rather than your own user. So, here what you can do is you can use wget command to get the latest source code of dspace. Wget is a very powerful command. In fact, it can download any file from the internet and puts it in the current directory. So, you can see the dspace source files are available with GitHub. So, if you give wget https github.com/dspace/dspace release, then download dspace version also and tar.gz file. Then obviously it downloads the dspace. Similarly, you can download the Tomcat from the Tomcat site. So, the exact versions, perhaps it is better to give the exact version numbers after visiting those either GitHub site or the Tomcat site. So, best is to visit those sites before you actually use the above command. Once you get these commands downloaded using wget, you can definitely untar and unzip these files. So, you can see that tar zxvf, that is Z stands for unzipping, X stands for extracting the files, the individual files out of the tar file. So, here both dspace and Tomcat are extracted. The next step is creating a database called dspace. See, in the earlier step, when you logged on to dspace, you created only dspace user. Now, let that user create a database called dspace. So, that means you log in as dspace, then you give the command create db, that is you want to create a database with the owner as dspace, and it is Unicode enabled, so that PostgreSQL will allow Unicode in the sense if you want to enter data in Hindi or any language other than English, then you have to enable Unicode to the of the Unicode feature of the PostgreSQL database. Then you are creating a database called dspace. Then naturally, once you download, these are the prerequisites. After you download, after you have untarred and unzipped dspace source files, you can see there would be a directory called dspace 5.5 release. So, change into the directory and you first give the maven command, which is the build program. You just give the command mvn package. Then of course, it downloads lot of jar files from the internet, and it takes really long time depending on the speed of the connectivity you have. I know some cases where normally it is done in 15 minutes, but sometimes it takes more than an hour to download all the required jar files. Once you see build process success, then perhaps you have to go dive deeper into the directories inside the dspace home directory. From the position where you are, move to dspace/target/dspace installer. This is the directory which was created by the maven, because once the maven creates these directories, that means it is successfully compiled. Now, you only have to do a little more extra job of installation. So, go to the step 13. Once it is compiled, you have to run a command ant fresh install. It is the one which creates the directories, creates the jar files, and puts, of course, it creates asset store, bin, config, all these in the home directory of dspace, and it creates one important directory called web apps. In that, it puts your XML UI interface files, your JSP UI interface files, your OAI files, related files, your Solr related files, then SWORD related files, everything will be placed in dspace home directories subdirectory called web apps. That is what exactly here you can see that that is the directory name. Now, go to Tomcat web apps directory. Whenever you have unzipped, Tomcat also creates lots of subdirectories and files. So, go to web apps directory of Tomcat, create soft links with the home directories web apps. This is exactly, this tilde stands for your DSpace home. The tilde stands, and that means I am creating a JSPI link under web apps of Tomcat with the web apps of DSpace. So, I am giving links to JSPUI, XMLUI, OAI, Solr. Say for example, if you think having both the interfaces is putting lot of load on your memory, whichever interface you would like to use, either JSPUI or XMLUI you can use. And if you do not want to share your metadata over OAI PMH protocol, you do not have to create a link to that. But Solr is completely essential, because for indexing the Solr component, Lucene does that, and for generating statistics also Solr comes. But more importantly, to have the search facility, browsing facility, everything, you require Solr. That means the most minimum are one of the interfaces, either JSPUI or XMLUI, and Solr. These two are the most important. The rest of the things definitely you should use, if preferably to have much more control over DSpace. So, once these links are done, just run Tomcat, that is it. Okay. So, probably Tomcat name is directory name is 8.0.35, depending on the version of the Tomcat you are using. Then under that there is a subdirectory called bin, and you run startup.sh. Normally in the Linux systems it would be .sh, whereas in Windows system maybe it is .bat. The first step after installation you have to do is create the administrator account. Though user accounts can be created over the browsers, administrator account has to be created from the terminal for various security reasons, because it is the administrator access which gives lot of power over your DSpace. So, it is always better to create the administrator. That is the reason you cannot create administrator account from the web pages. You can create only from the terminal. Now, this is what JSPUI interface looks like, and 8080 is still there because we did not integrate Tomcat with Apache server. That is why it looks like this. And then you have XMLUI interface. Of course, if you want, you can change either rubric or mannequin or any other. Then of course, OAI screen looks like this. Why I am showing this is, after installation, please check whether everything is running properly. Then Solr also, you check whether Solr is working. So, these are the 4 screens normally you have to check whether your job is done. Once installation is done, it is a good idea to put the cron jobs in place. Cron jobs are executed commands periodically. That is, you have cron jobs for sending email alerts to subscribers, generating full text indexes, or generating thumbnails, perform checksums, that is to, after all, digital objects may get corrupted on your system, but checksum ensures if everything is okay. If something is wrong, then you may have to restore from the backup. Then optimizing your discovery, OAI, PMH, statistics generation, everything is taken care of by cron jobs. To get a full listing of cron jobs, go to DSpace documentation, collect all the cron jobs which you are interested to run periodically, copy them into cron. That is to use cron tab -e and cut and paste them into this particular file. So, running DSpace at boot time, you can after all, instead of manually every day starting Tomcat, if you put in in Debian and Ubuntu systems, in rc.local file you can put the following command to run the moment your system is started, immediately dspace also runs. So, integrating with Tomcat and Apache, that is to avoid this 8080 every time, what you can do is you can configure Apache in such a way, if you give these jobs either from a terminal or from your any favorite GUI based editor, Tomcat, Apache configuration you have to change. This particular command adds proxy pass and proxy pass reverse for JSP-UI, similarly XML UI and all the rest of the interfaces if you want, like OAI and other things. Solr need not be given because anyhow you have to run it on a local machine. So, if you run proxy pass, then you can avoid 80801. So, after that you have to run a few more commands, that is A2nmod, because you are using proxy server to avoid 8080, you have to run A2nmod proxy, proxy AJP, proxy HTTP, these three modules of Apache you have to run. After that you have to restart Apache again. Then next time you do not have to use 8080, directly you can say JSP-UI or XML UI. So, if you think the entire thing is fairly complex, we have created liblivecd where everything is pre-installed with Linux, with DSpace. Of course, in addition we have put Drupal and Koha also. So, as Unix system administration is somewhat complex, probably you can download livecd from SourceForge and install it, but be careful, it should be on a new system, it cannot be used on an existing system because it will format the entire hard disk. Okay. So, with that that is the last slide. So, either you can configure on your own or you can use liblivecd to install DSpace, Koha and Drupal, but this covers about DSpace installation. Thank you.